Good morning. Oh, the microphone does work. Very warm welcome to you all to the Money Conference 2018. My name is Darshini David. It's my huge privilege to be your conference chair today. It's been an amazing week. I think it's surpassed all expectations, and we're going to carry on doing that today. At this conference today, the idea is that we'll be discussing current issues, best practice, and showcasing ideas. And of course, the aim is to improve financial capability and to revolutionise the lives of people around the UK, particularly those living in debt. Now, we're going to be challenging ideas to discover what really works. So we're going to take you out of your comfort zone today as well. This hall it's got a 100-year history, 106 years to be precise, of being a centre for debate and discussion. And what happens here today isn't just about what happens in the hall. It's about starting a conversation that really does change the way we think and the way that people around the UK think. Now, talking of communicating, we've got a paper-free theme at the conference today. We're going to be using an audience engagement platform. So that means you can access today's programme and slides live on your mobile devices. And if you don't already know, what you have to do is you type that URL into your browser. It is glsr.it/TMC18. And if you haven't seen it already, your Wi-Fi password is up there as well. It's Talk Money. You can access the system, and once you do that, there'll be some questions to answer. So we're not going to let you just sit back and listen. You'll be engaging as well through that platform. That will help us evaluate today's conference. And if you complete the questions, there's no such thing as a free lunch. If you complete those questions, you can then download slides from the sessions. We've got a very tightly packed agenda today, so without any further ado, I'm going to hand you over to the hosts of today's conference. They are, of course, the Money Advice Service and the Money Advice Liaison Group. So I'd like to hand you over to the chairs of both organisations. They are, of course, Andy Briscoe and Liz Barclay.
Thank you very much. This is a bit like an Oscar ceremony, isn't it? Yeah, do you think? No, okay. Well, good morning, and a very warm welcome to the 2018 Talk Money Conference. Jointly hosted, as you've just heard, by the Money Advice Service and the Money Advice Liaison Group. Now, this conference is the centerpiece of Talk Money Week. And around the country this week, 350 events are taking place with the one theme and one purpose of getting people to talk about money. And thousands of organizations are involved today in this event and in those events. And millions of people, we believe, during this week will engage with their money. And we all know how important that is. From all our research at the Money Advice Service, the biggest factor in getting people to improve their financial capability is to engage with their money. And so talking about it with their friends, with their partners, with guidance services, with advisors, that is the most important thing that we can achieve. Now, this year, as you probably all know, is the third year that we have had a week that's been about financial capability. And the intention is to get financial capability to the top of the agenda for the government, for politicians, and for everyone in the UK. And I'm just so pleased that this year's Talk Money Week is by far bigger and by far more energized than any week that we've had. And that is down to you and all the other organizations that support us. So we've got a busy agenda today. There's one particular agenda item I just want to mention, and that is Sir Hector Sants will be talking to you this morning. Sir Hector is the chair of the Single Financial Guidance Body, and it is him and his team that will be taking forward the great work that you do. He has some exciting things to say and some challenging things to say. And all I would ask you is that you give him and his team the support that you've given me and the Money Advice Service over the last few years. So I'll now hand over to Liz.
Thank you. Thank you. Slightly ironic, I think, Andy, that only you and I in this room have any paper. We're going paperless. This is, of course, the biggest event happening in Westminster today. And we're thrilled, Malg is absolutely thrilled to be bringing you this conference in partnership with the Money Advice Service. And an effective partnership has long been the holy grail. It's something that I think I've been going on about from platforms like this for the past 25 years. And we hope that by bringing so many people under one roof, people who have influence and credibility right across the money sectors, that we will keep talk money on the agenda, and this conference will have lasting impact. There are always bumps in the road to a perfect partnership, and what I think you have to do is constantly keep the end goal in sight. And I think for us, the end goal is financial well-being. It is the financial well-being of the people who are our clients and the people who are our customers. And it's not just the conference that was the goal in this particular road. It was improved financial capability and improving the lives of people in debt. So for me, the partnership is the thing, and I hope that other partnerships will be formed as this conference goes on. Before I go, just a couple of housekeeping messages. Mobile phones on silent, if you would. There's no fire alarm test planned. If it's necessary to evacuate the building, you will hear an announcement in English. Please proceed to the grass area outside this building and the area outside the QE2 complex. And please, if you just have a look around, you will see there are exits all around us. You can tweet about the event. It's #TalkMoney. The Wi-Fi you already know. The exhibitors are very, very keen to talk to you in the breaks. And I would just like to thank everybody who's been involved in creating this wonderful conference. They have worked really, really hard. I would say thank you to everybody who's worked on it, and I would ask you to please have a wonderful day. And I'm going to hand back to Darshini.
Liz, Andy, thank you so much. Well, we have got a lot to get through this morning. We're going to hear from a number of keynote speakers. We heard there from Andy about Sir Hector Sants. We're going to talk to him a little bit later on. But first up, I'm very pleased to say, is Dame Helena Morrissey, currently head of Legal & General Investment Management's personal investing business. She has, of course, got a very long and very illustrious track record across the city. She was previously CEO of Newton Investment Management. She's also the founder of the 30% Club, which has successfully increased the representation of female board members amongst our biggest companies. She's going to be setting the scene for us this morning, so I'd like to welcome Dame Helena to the stage.
It's wonderful to be here. I'm delighted to have been given the opportunity to deliver the first keynote. It looks a fascinating day, a very comprehensive agenda, and hopefully there'll be something in it for everyone to take away to help us all help more people to talk about money. Now, I believe in practicing what you preach, so I felt I should start by talking about my own money. I obviously realize we're not encouraging everyone to talk about money publicly, so perhaps I'm going a bit further than we're really expecting others to do, but I wanted to share some of my own experiences, really, I suppose, as an example of how emotive and complex our relationship as individuals is with money. So although I'm going to start in my childhood, don't worry, I'm not going to give this long version. Effectively, it's the 7 stages of my life to date in money. The first stands out very clearly in my mind, and that was just before my 5th birthday, because I had learned, thanks to a very patient father, how to count money. And at the time, I learned to count in pounds, shilling, and pence. A month before my 5th birthday, we went decimal. So I found money frustrating, confusing, and then, of course, I heard my parents talking about how many shops had taken the opportunity to raise prices. So instantly, before I was 5, money was a bit of a pain, to be honest, and I didn't particularly trust it. Second moment that stands out for me was just ahead of my 7th birthday. Now, this is a little bit of a sob story. My mother is a very perfect parent in many other respects, but she really had an antipathy to children's birthday parties. And, I mean, I'm a mother of lots of children, and I sort of get where she's coming from now, although I take the opposite view and love parties. But anyway, she wanted to pay me not to have a birthday party. And I should clarify as well that my parents are both teachers, so money was never very sort of freely available. And at the time, my sister was very young and my mother didn't work. So £10, which is what she offered me, was a considerable sum of money. And I guess what, even though I was very sad about not having a birthday party, and I wasn't particularly, bowled over by the £10, what it represented to me was the fact that money and the value of things meant different things to different people. And there was an emotional value in that £10. It signified to me just how much she did not want me to have a party. Third phase was when I went to university, and at one stage I thought about being a barrister. And as I said, my parents didn't have a huge amount of money to be in quite a sacrifice. I was conscious of that, to pay for my living costs and so forth. It was before we had student loans. And the concept of me not earning for another several years and having quite high living expenses was something that would have been a real challenge. Fortunately, I changed my mind, but at the time, I was again reminded how much money could be a restriction if you didn't have it. Now, the fourth phase was a bit happier. You'll be pleased to hear there's good news bits in this, because I did, as is obviously now the case, I entered the world of fund management and actually lucked out financially in my first job. I was sent to work in New York. It was the very late 1980s, where I spent 2 years, and I was paid in pounds. And I'm not going to test anybody on the cable exchange rate, but actually each month for the first year and a half I was there, the pound appreciated against the dollar. So every month I had a pay rise, which was wonderful, and a bit of a windfall. But I have to say, I looked upon that, and luckily I did, given what happened next, with my growing bank balance. I was able to save most of the money, actually. And I looked upon it with a little bit of unease, because it felt like I had just sort of benefited from something and not really worked for it. I needn't have worried too much, because phase 5 was easy come, easy go. Came back to London, my boyfriend and I wanted to get married, but he and his flatmate had bought a little flat in Battersea on the very peak day of the market in 1988 and had negative equity. So my savings just went to pay off that, basically. It was quite a neat transaction. But then we entered a period of quite financial stress. We had got married quite young, we had our first child quite young. We did still have a big mortgage, and interest rates were double digits. So money became a real stress. Phase 6 was the change of direction, because I joined a firm, was rapidly promoted, and earned money enough to pay off not the mortgage that we had, because we kept buying new houses, but we ended up with feeling quite financially secure reasonably quickly. We also benefited, as young people aren't so much able to do now, from appreciation in property prices. And for the first time really in my life, I learned that money could give you security. That actually it also meant that you could provide choices for people. Our children could go to private school. And I became conscious that money had become much less of a burden for me. And the 7th phase has been realizing the power of money. So not just for ourselves, but also to further the causes and values that one has. So, for example, and this is not an advert, but I put my own ISA into the fund that was set up at Legal & General since I joined, around gender in business, obviously an area that I care greatly about. And I've learned that actually, although my money won't make a huge impact, then together we can make a difference. Now, I tell you all that, and then slightly revealingly, because I want to illustrate the fact, as we all are aware, but just to remind us, that our relationship with money is not just a sort of rational thing. It's an emotionally charged issue. Sometimes it's quite a fraught issue. And we all have our own stories, our own experiences to tell. So as we get into this mission that we have to encourage more people to take control of their finances, I think we have to start very much from the awareness that it's not as simple, as building it and they will come. Now, a year and a half ago, almost to the day, I started a new role at Legal & General, new for me, but new for the company as well. Legal & General runs £1 trillion almost of other people's money, but less than 0.5% of it is actually invested with us directly from the public. And the company had decided that actually wanted to, partly because of beliefs that we should combine profit and purpose and help people become more financially capable, but also aware that individuals are having to take more responsibility for their own finances. So a new business unit set up. And for me, it wasn't just a job. I was excited about it because, to use the word I just did the other moment, it was a mission. That with my slightly complex relationship with money, my realization that for me, money is all about security, first and foremost, I wanted to see if I could use some of my influence to try to play a part in the mission to engage the nation to save and invest more. Now, a lot of our competitors are doing something similar, which is great because it means there's a whole sort of raft of activity in this area. Sadly, I don't have all the answers. You'd be surprised if I did, but I do want to share a few things that we're doing. First and foremost, I want to stress that we're not putting all our eggs in the technology basket. I believe that technology, it's pretty clear, can help us to reach more people more easily and more cheaply. But as I hopefully have already illustrated, it's just not a question of laying it out there and expecting people, therefore, to engage. There needs to be an emotional connection. People need to feel that the money is relevant, that it's appealing, that it's not just a chore or a burden. Now, so we're trying a few things. One of the aspects of the 30% Club that I take with me on other challenges is that I realize that when you haven't achieved something, when something has seemed an elusive goal, then you have to experiment. There is no blueprint to follow. So I think it's really important at this point that we recognize that we don't know exactly how to engage people with money. Now, we've already discussed that talking about it, the wonderful theme of both the conference and the week, and hopefully for many weeks to come, is a very first step. When I was working in New York, the very first thing I did actually off the plane, when I arrived at my hotel room and I switched on the TV, partly for the noise that you get, and I was amazed that there were so many channels devoted to money issues. And it's something I think that's particularly, not only a British taboo, but it is something that we particularly find hard to talk about. Now, some of the things that we're working on at Legal & General include, like I say, many of our competitors, having a decent attempt at trying to burrow into the psyche of different segments of the population. And earlier this year, we embarked on a pretty comprehensive segmentation exercise, whereupon we looked at, with some help from others engaged on this, 55 million adults. And initially, at least through data, tried to segment them into with different characteristics. 11 different segments, 4 financially vulnerable, 4 financially well off, and then 3 often people who have some money but don't know or aren't interested, it appears, in actually starting to invest or to save. But as I said, the data isn't enough of its own. So what we've done is conducted a lot of focus groups, and we've listened to people. And of course, there isn't a magic formula for coming up with a little thing for every single individual story, but there are definitely themes. We obviously have the issues around fear about money. We have the issues around jargon around money. We have the issues just about a lack of financial education. Some of the things that we're trying to do to really excite people about the potential to get invested do include starting with very young people. So we have worked with the Girl Guiding Organization, and I don't know how many people are familiar with it. In fact, 1 in 4 British adult women was a brownie or a Girl Guide, me included. So a lot of women in the room may well have been a brownie or a Girl Guide. They currently have 400,000 active members, 100,000 on the waiting list. They have 100,000 volunteers. They have 300,000 parents who are engaged in various activities. So it's a very big, scalable organization. And we've worked with them to introduce something called the Saver Badge, which is encouraging girls to work towards saving money and doing something with that, energy and their time. And then most recently, we've launched a competition around finding the future female entrepreneurs, or at least encouraging female entrepreneurship. And of course, the Girl Guides are spread very much throughout the country, so this is importantly not a London or a Southeast-centric effort. We've also been using technology. As I said, we're not resting on our laurels or being complacent that actually if we build it, they will come. But we have been working real time with, when we've analyzed working with focus groups, some of the things that they say interest them or don't interest them, and we adapt our website. We take people on a different journey. For example, we used to have sort of 3 sorts of funds that people could pick, and we realized from looking at the traffic that people were quite confused, and we've ended up with only 2 now. And we can monitor that real time. So this has become a very active approach. Again, stressing that we are, to some extent, experimenting rather than claiming we know all the answers. We've also embarked on an advertising campaign which is around owning your world. And the point of this is to, it's a little bit of a double meaning, of course, encourage people to think that by investing in themselves, just as they do perhaps more frequently these days around their health. Apparently, if you were out jogging in the 1960s, you would be stopped by the police for suspicious activities, whereas now that's become quite a regular sort of thing. So we're trying to get money to be a regular thing, an everyday occurrence. And the other aspect of owning your world is around being able to invest in line with your values or interests. So as well as our gender and leadership fund, we have a climate change fund. And again, what we've done is when we came up with that campaign, we didn't just pretend that we knew all the answers and we would put it out there. We conducted very extensive focus groups, particularly actually involving women. Now, it's taken me all this time. I did mention the 30% Club briefly, but I hadn't majored on the women. And of course, this for me is the particular challenge. We know that women are much more likely in older age to be financially vulnerable than men. The recent reports out by the fantastic Ensuring Women's Futures group again reminds us that at the age of 65, working women are likely to have, on average anyway, a retirement pot of only 1/5 of the size of male counterparts. So not 1/5 less than, but 1/5 of. And of course we know that women have a longer life expectancy. So one of the things we've tried to do in our lineup of different activities is to work on the communications aspect. And with Boring Money, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with, we embarked on a translation exercise, for want of a better way of putting it. So we had 7 female communications experts, so including a TV presenter. If we do it again, Darshini, you can be volunteered. TV presenter, we had a woman who writes for one of the Sunday supplements, and we presented them with financial marketing literature, and they translated it into real and meaningful and appealing ways of demonstrating the same concepts. So to give you just one example, when we demonstrate or display what's in a portfolio, if people have got that far, I think it just sometimes doesn't seem very meaningful to people. There's a whole list of company names, often their trading names rather than their brand names, and then obviously a series of weightings alongside that. Instead, they put up a board which had all the logos of the companies, and then the size of the weighting in the portfolio was proportionate to the size of the rectangle on the whole map. And immediately it just brought the portfolio to life. And what was fascinating was actually we had an art exhibition just to showing how much we wanted to test this out, and got feedback from this. And people were saying, actually, for the first time I understand what I would own if I even invested. So these are just a few ideas. We've got a long way to go. We are working now on other aspects of our offering. And we'll look forward to coming back and showing those. I get a sense I've now run out of time, so stop talking. But yes, where was I going to end? I was wanting to say that I think, again, the key thing is to remind ourselves that what we're not doing here is just business as usual. That for our business at Legal & General, but also for others, what we need to do is approach this in a completely different way to just building a business. This is not just about looking at the numbers, shuffling things around, and expecting things to happen. It is about getting out there, emotionally engaging with our audience. I won't mention our investment seminar that we had recently, but I would if I had time. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Helena. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off in your prime
it's fine,
there.
It's fine. You were out of the shadows.
As well as managing money today, of course, we are having to manage time as well. So, and I also wanted to make sure that we have the time for a couple of questions for you as well, because I'm sure our audience do have them. We have a couple of roving mics. So if you could raise your hands, we can get one to you. I would urge you to introduce yourself and also, if you could, to keep the questions brief. There is a question over there, please.
Juliet Collier, Campaign for Learning. I was really interested in the way that you were talking about involving women and actually consulting with women. But one of the things that's really relevant for us is about working with people who won't have even thought about investment, because at the moment they're trying to feed children and that's quite a struggle. One of the things that I'd be interested in knowing is if there's anything that you're doing that is making those small steps, like enabling those families to deliver, and create regular savings in some way, even when they're on very low incomes, because that kind of habit of those small amounts, even if it's pence, really will support them. And my question comes from some work that we've been doing with the Money Advice Service on a program called Family Fortunes. And we have been amazed through the program how much people are able to save from their everyday lives.
No, well, it's a great question, and I have to say it's something that we've been thinking about hard, but haven't come up with what we'd call the sort of killer solution yet. Some of our competitors have already obviously launched apps whereby if you buy a sandwich in a shop, you can round up the total to the nearest pound. And definitely this concept of, but obviously if people are very cooking their own food, they're not going to necessarily do quite the same. So we have been exploring a couple of partnerships with outlets or retailers where people would be doing regular shopping in a supermarket and so forth, just to get into the habit and also to have some, I suppose, some tips about how to save as well, save on their shopping and other things as well. So it's early days for us. I'm happy if you want to give me your card to work together on it or to keep you in the loop, but it's certainly something that we want to tackle or help tackle.
Got time for one more if anybody's got a question. Gosh, I think you stunned them all into silence, Helen. I've never seen this before.
Well, you'll save some time.
Can I ask you a quick question
Yes,
while you're
of
here?
course.
I'm just going to out you now because you recently, despite appearances, became a grandmother. So in terms of, you were talking about your own early stages of life, in terms of the conversations you'll be having with your grandchild, how do they have to change compared to what's happened in the past when it comes to talking money?
So first and foremost, he's only 10 months, so I will let him off for a bit. I'll let him off for a little while. I don't think a lot has changed in terms of the basics, but I mean, my youngest child is only 9, and actually what I try to do is make money again. It's not an abstract. It is something that is tangible and real. And like many other 9-year-old girls, for example, she likes making slime. And actually, I have found it's the way to have her understand about budgeting and also and saving and possibly buying things cheaper in bulk. Through the cost of making slime. And actually, it's been quite interesting because then what I've seen from her realizing that this isn't just a question of, give me the money, I'll go and get this, that she's become focused on, well, A, how she makes the money, B, how she spends it, and translates that into other aspects of her life. So I think just making money real one of the things, I'm very conscious that there's a growing effort in schools. We've got obviously financial education in the curriculum. We've now got the textbook that Martin Lewis has helped to deliver, and it's, I hope, going to see great things. But there are other subjects like maths where now we've got great tools in like mathematics, which bring it alive, that subject alive. And I think money in some ways is easier. We're just going to make sure that we're equipping young people with life skills, debt management and so forth. But lots of it hasn't changed. I think in some ways the delivery through technology is makes it a little easier.
Dame Helena Morrissey, really great to talk to you. Thank you. Causing great waves, I know, in the fund management community. So thank you for coming and giving us an inspiring start to the morning.
Thank you.
Now, of course, those of you who've been following policy developments would have welcomed the announcement of, for example, the idea of breathing space, more breathing space for those in heavy debt, and action on dormant accounts. But what other work should our policymakers be doing in terms of supporting the need for increasing financial capability across the UK? I'm really pleased to announce that our next keynote speaker this morning is the Economic Secretary to the Treasury. He's, of course, John Glen MP. He's got a very, I'm sure, busy agenda today, a few things going on over the road, as we've been hearing about. So it's my great pleasure to welcome him to the conference and invite him to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and it's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me to address you this morning. I'm truly impressed by the wide range of organisations represented here, and all, I think, with a common objective, one that I share, to support financial resilience across the length and breadth of this country. And as the Minister responsible for the UK's financial services, financial capability is an issue very close to my heart. And today I'm here, later on I'm making a speech with some hedge funds, rather underscores the whole range of the agenda that I have to span. But this is one that I take very seriously. And I've devoted a lot of attention to this, working closely with the Chancellor. And I want to highlight a meeting I had this summer with Maternity Matters, a charity like many of those that you support, and was supported by the What Works Fund, which was designed to actually support those endeavours that really were making meaningful interventions. And when I went to Maternity Matters in Scotland, I saw firsthand the need to focus on the vulnerable populations that exist, giving appropriate, tailored advice in order to build resilience for the future. And that's what I think this area of policy that I'm involved in needs to focus on all the time. Financial inclusion is really important, and I chair the Financial Inclusion Policy Forum. And we know that there are people who find themselves in circumstances in their lives when they are vulnerable. And what they need is tailored and practical support to deal with those circumstances that they fall into. And that's why we set up the Financial Inclusion Policy Forum. It has its ear to the ground and a mandate to produce practical solutions. It brings together Whitehall regulators and industry to unlock access to affordable financial services and builds people's financial resilience to deal with those shocks that come along. And this forum will build on the important efforts to tackle financial exclusion made over the past years, like ensuring that the 9 largest personal current account providers in the UK offer fee-free bank accounts to customers who are unbanked who are ineligible for a standard current account. These excellent products can help the financially excluded access mainstream banking services. So the forum has met twice this year, and we have already made, I think, significant progress in understanding some of the key challenges and identifying targeted solutions to tackle them. So following the forum's work earlier this year, at the budget just 2.5 weeks ago, we announced a robust package of measures. And the fact that these featured in the Chancellor's speech just shows how seriously he and I take this area. So I just want to highlight some of the announcements. An Affordable Credit Challenge Fund to harness the power of fintech to address the challenges faced by social and community lenders. Raising awareness of alternatives to high street credit by simplifying regulation to make it easier for registered social landlords to direct tenants to social lenders. A pilot for a no-interest loan scheme to help people for whom even borrowing from social and community lenders can be unaffordable. And learning lessons from other parts of the world, a prize-linked savings scheme pilot for credit unions that will support the sector through increased membership, awareness and deposits, as well as encouraging participants to build up savings. I'm very pleased with this package of measures, which I believe will make a real difference in people's lives. It's a good start. There will be more to come. And it's important to remember that this tops up the suite of existing initiatives, such as the Rent Recognition Challenge, which seeks fintech solutions to enable tenants to record and share their rental data. And this is a very important issue, and Lord Bird has done a great deal of work in the House of Lords to raise awareness of the challenges here, and I'm listening very carefully to what he has to say on this subject. Experian recently announced that rental payments will now be used in credit score reports and is working with open banking partners who participated in the challenge. So I do hope that rental data will make a big difference for people who have a poor credit history. And finally, I would like to mention the work that we have undertaken across government to make £55 million from dormant accounts available for financial inclusion initiatives. This funding will be delivered by an independent organisation which will primarily focus on supporting affordable credit providers, allowing them to scale and reach many more consumers. I think there's more work to be done in this area to see if that pot of money can be expanded, and that's certainly something I'm working with my ministerial colleagues to explore. But in addition to improving access to affordable credit, the government is staunchly committed to helping people in problem debt, as well as seeing funding for the provision of debt advice increased by nearly 20% this year. At the budget, we also announced a detailed consultation on a breathing space scheme for people who have fallen into problem debt. And the proposed breathing space will be a 60-day period where creditors will not be able to recover debt and must help people get their finances back on track. And I would value your input into the breathing space consultation, and I'm eager to hear your thoughts and how we get this intervention just right. Finally, in order to help people build financial resilience, we need to support them to save. That's why in September, following a successful trial, we launched the Help to Save scheme. Help to Save supports low-income families to build up a rainy day fund by offering a 50% government bonus on up to £50 of savings each month. And this is designed to be as accessible as possible, involving people making small deposits of £2 or £3 whenever they can, in order to, which will be matched at the end of a 2-year period by a 50% credit from a government bonus. By the end of October, over 70,000 people in total had opened accounts, with more than 6 million in deposits made. Help to Save is available to working people in receipt of working tax credits and universal credit. And again, people have only have to be on those benefits at one moment in time. They're then eligible to register and carry on through the 4-year period. So I'd like to ask your help to make people more aware of this critically important scheme. All the initiatives I've outlined are targeted at improving people's financial health. But to achieve long-lasting change, we need to do more than plaster over deep-rooted issues. We need to tackle the problem at source, and at the heart of the problem is a lack of confidence in consumers across the UK. We need to remedy this and bolster the UK's skills bank so that people are able to manage their finances. And this is where I believe your role is critical. Financial education is something we must continue to improve across the country, especially for the next generation, which is why we've made financial literacy a part of the secondary school curriculum in England. We also made it a statutory requirement for the new single financial guidance body to look strategically at financial education for children and young people. And it's good to see Sir Hector Sants here today as the chairman of that body. We will work with them to continue the excellent work of the Money Advice Service in recent years to support providers of financial education. And I would like to congratulate the work of Young Money and Martin Lewis, who developed a comprehensive financial education textbook to support teachers delivering this subject in schools. The government supports this initiative and looks forward to working with more of you who deliver such crucial resources and support in our schools. I want to ensure that teachers and schools across the country are aware that this resource is available. And as a first step, I personally will pledge to write to every school in my constituency. Last count, I think there were 55, and offer to go and see them and to give a workshop on this subject. I realise that the book is focused on secondary schools, so imagine, hopefully that will mean 9 encounters in the next few months if they want me. They see probably too much of me sometimes anyway. But I think we've got to take the message out there, and I'll be encouraging my colleagues in the House of Commons to adopt this textbook and to use it in their interactions with their schools. So, ladies and gentlemen, the statesman William Gladstone once said that finance is, as it were, the stomach of the country, from which all the other organs take their tone. Well, as the Economic Secretary, I guess this makes me responsible for the digestive health of the economy, and I want to keep it in fighting form. It's my priority to ensure that financial services support hard-working people at every stage of their lives. Because just as private property rights are a bedrock of our liberal society, there is something to be said for financial rights. These are equally something to fight for, something to applaud, and to make sure that they're accessible to all parts of our country at all levels of the society. So I thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. This is an agenda that I'm really committed to and determined to take forward in the various initiatives that I've outlined and more this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Our thanks to John Glen, Economic Secretary, to the Treasury, and of course, as we were just hearing there, it's all about the digestive health of the economy, financial capability. It's quite an image, really, isn't it? But it is true that obviously this underpins the health of our economy going forward in very uncertain times, productivity and, frankly, prosperity and everything to do with that. So let's talk about action as well as words. The calls to action, which are being launched today, the 5 calls to action. We're going to talk about those with Sir Hector Sants, who I would like to welcome to the stage now. As you all know, Sir Hector Sants is the newly appointed chair of the Single Financial Guidance Body. He's also a trustee of Just Finance. He's on the Financial Capability Board. His previous roles, which I could take the next 20 minutes talking about in itself, include Chief Executive of the then FSA. He was also on the Bank of England's Financial Policy Committee. He's had positions, for example, at the consultancy Oliver Wyman and at Barclays as well. So welcome to you. It's good to have you with us here on the stage.
Thank you.
You are, of course, newly in position. You've been there since the 3rd of October.
That's right.
So this will be the first chance most of our audience will have had to hear from you, perhaps even since the announcement of your appointment. You've put financial capability front and centre of what you want to do. Why is it so important to you?
Well, from my personal point of view, I think I'd highlight a couple of experiences. It's my time as a regulator and my time with various voluntary organisations such as, and not-for-profit organisations such as Step Change. I think when I was at the regulator, one of the things that was very much brought home to me was that the financial system doesn't work well from the point of view of serving society, serving everybody in society. It is not a system that works for everybody. And that was very much brought home to me during my time there at the regulator. And when I was thinking about that, and how would we solve that, or how could one start to change that situation, it's always struck me that in order to do it, we need to attack it in three ways. Yes, you need good regulation. There's been a huge amount talked about good regulation. You need good regulation. Yes, you need firms that behave well. They have to have the right culture. They have to have people who know what the right thing is to do. Again, there's been a huge amount talked about that. But I think one of my conclusions is that alone is not going to do it. We have to also have financially informed, capable, empowered individuals in the system. And when I look at events over the last few years, I would say the emphasis has been on regulation in the firms. Very, very important, but it's time we started thinking about and doing more for individuals to help them be informed and empowered. So that's what I learned from regulation. What did I learn from the voluntary sector? What did I learn from the not-for-profit sector? Well, there I learned something in a way even more important, which is it's not really just about finance, is it? It's not just about financial capability. It's about personal well-being. It's about the essence, if you like, of why we're here. And unless you're financially capable, I think it's going to be very, very difficult to live a contented life. So that link from finance, which is traditionally kind of off there, into something which is actually right at the heart of people, is what I learned in the second section. So that's why financial capability is so important. And that's why I would hope that the SFGB, by the way, we need a new name. I was
going to ask you that question if you had a name yet.
Have to put financial capability right at the heart of what it does.
And as you say, financial capability, well-being are inseparable. And that brings us to our 5 calls to action, which I think we can pop up on screen there. I'm not going to ask you to read them all because that is a little bit of a stretch. But it goes through 5 very specific areas. Why those 5 and what you're hoping to achieve?
So just to be quite clear, of course, these calls to action come from the Financial Capability Board, a body set up by MAS, which I'm a member of, and they are a call for collective action by everybody in the community. Why have we chosen those 5? Well, first of all, I think it is because they're right at the heart of financial capability. If we could achieve that, then we would have gone a very, very long way to solving the challenge which is in front of us. So they are enmeshed in and very much central to what we're looking to achieve when we talk about a financially capable nation. I think the second point is we wanted some calls to action which were absolutely understandable and make what we're about real and understandable to everybody. I think there's a risk, there's an awful lot of jargon talked about financially capable, kind of, in that sort of space, there's an awful lot of jargon. And we want some calls which are calls to action which everybody understands. And that maybe takes me to the last point there. They are calls to action. They are objectives that we believe are achievable if we all work together.
Now you've got a room full here, 600 people, 600 members of the financial capability, sorry to use that bit of jargon once again, and the debt management community. So what do you want to hear from them? What do you want them to take away from this?
First and foremost, I want them to take away that this is what we want to get done. Now is the moment to take a significant leap forward and get those goals achieved. I think if you look around what's been going on over the last few years, there's a huge amount has been going on and a lot of progress has already been made. And also critically, we all know a lot more about what needs to be done than we did a few years ago. So one of my great themes at the moment is we don't need to kind of start inventing new things. What we need to do is take the great ideas that are out there and leverage them up to achieve national impact. So in essence, I would like people to go away focused on taking these forward as actions and doing so by finding the good ideas that are out there and making them happen.
And we heard from John Glen, Economic Secretary for the Treasury. Unfortunately, he's not in the audience at the moment. But what do you want government to do as part and parcel of this? How do you want policymakers to take this on?
Well, as we've already heard from John Glen, the government is very supportive of this general agenda. Treasury is, in fact, a member, a participant in the Financial Capability Board. So there is a good general level of support for what we're about. But I am sure that as we go forward, yes, we can make a lot of progress with everybody else in this room, but there will be some elements of this agenda that need specific action by government. And when we get to those points, we will be asking them to take those specific actions, and I very much hope that they will.
Are you concerned? I mean, because as we've been hearing, there's a lot going on at the moment. Everybody's slightly distracted by Brexit. Are you concerned that this might just slip off the policy agenda, and therefore we all have to shout that bit louder?
Well, I think we can always shout that a little bit louder. I think that there's an awful lot of noise we can make here. I think it's very important generally, slightly making a separate point, if I may, for a second, that we get financial capability right up the agenda so it becomes something that is seen as central to policy making, which at the moment I don't think it is, perhaps in the way that some of the other issues of well-being are in the health area, mental health and so forth. Is there a risk that there isn't enough focus? Of course there's a risk, but I'm confident that the issue is so important, and I'm also actually confident that government is very focused on it, that I do believe we can succeed.
Now, in a year's time, we're sitting here again. What do you hope by that point? What kind of progress do you hope we could have made, realistically?
Well, I think on each of those individual calls for actions, they are at different points of development, yeah. So I won't go through each one. So they'll be at different points. But I think if we could have achieved 2 goals, we would have made great progress, and I would certainly personally be delighted. So first of all, if everybody out there who matters has actually heard about the calls to action and can still remember them and is still working on them, so that they've become embedded in the consciousness of our collective efforts, so that everybody is aware that this is something that matters. We need longevity in these ideas. They need to become a part and parcel of what we're about all the time. And then secondly, I think we want to have absolutely identified a few key specifics out of the numerous great projects that are out there that we're really all getting behind. And then over the next 2 to 3 years, we'll see those specifics build momentum.
Now, your background, as I say, is very varied. You've worked in regulation, you've worked in financial services itself. What role do you think the industry has to play, the financial services industry has to play in the regulator in terms of making sure that financial capability becomes a way of life, so to speak?
Well, huge. Obviously, they are the delivery mechanism for much of what matters here. And if the financial services industry is not behind it, then it's not going to succeed. I am actually delighted that UKFI, the principal trade body, have already indicated that they're very supportive of the agenda, so that's a good step forward. I also do believe, based on a lot of conversations I've already had, at a personal level, there is a lot of goodwill. So I'm confident that the financial services industry will get behind it, but I do think, just to be clear, it's not going to be enough for the financial services industry just to say it's a good idea. That's a pretty cheap win for them. Actually, what we need is for them to do something, and that will require them to do some things differently from what they have been doing in the past.
Can you give us a few examples of that?
Well, I think it is about ensuring that there are sufficient products out there, sufficient services that everybody does feel included. But also critically, it's about how they go about delivering those services. What is their mindset? Of course, there's a lot of comment already from financial services firms how they put the customer first and central, but they've been saying that for years. It is not enough just to say you're putting the customer first and central. You actually have to put yourself in the mindset of the customer and the circumstances that customer is in, and actually be absolutely committed to looking after everybody regardless of their circumstances. And I don't think that total commitment and that switch in the way they view the customer is deeply embedded in the industry as it should be.
Plenty for the industry to think about there, but of course, as I say, you've embarking on this new role. You say there's all of two of you in a couple of desks at the moment, but things are going to move very quickly from here on. You didn't answer that question about whether there's a name as yet. Can you give us any steer at all? I mean,
No,
clearly, in
I
terms
have
of
some
engaging
ideas,
with
but
customers.
there's a process to go through which requires parliamentary approval and so forth, so we'll all have to wait and see.
Watch
but I'm
the
sure there's a
space.
huge amount we can do without a name, so we shouldn't be held up by that.
Now, and talking about what you're going to do, I mean, the calls to action there, as you say, very detailed, very practical steps there. What kind of steer does that give us in terms of the strategic direction you see for the SFGB?
Well, I think it's very, very helpful having the calls of action because it helps the SFGB hit the ground running, and it makes the point that, yes, it has a whole set of extremely important statutory services to deliver, such as the delivery or ensuring the delivery and provision of debt advice, which of course is incredibly important. But what the calls to action remind us is indeed what John, Glen and others have already said, that unless you fix the financial capability, the financial health of the nation in terms of individuals' abilities to make judgments in an informed and capable way, then these problems are not going to go away. You have to address it at the point of origination, not just at the point of remediation.
And in terms of rallying these calls to action, when people leave here today, what do you want them to A, have achieved, and B, go away and do in practical terms?
I want them to know what's up on that screen. I want them to make sure everybody else out there knows what's up on that screen. And I want people to go away and think, how can I as an individual and the organisation which I work in make a significant contribution to delivering what's on that screen?
So Hector Sants, we wish you well with the evolution of the SFGB and look forward to hearing more in due course. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Fascinating. Now, you heard it there, 5 calls to action, and you will be tested on them at the end of the day, of course. But in the meantime, thank you to all our speakers this morning. Thank you for listening. We are now going to go into a coffee break, a refreshment break in the lecture hall and the library, and that's where you were earlier on today for coffee. After that, please do move out to the breakout sessions. They are rooms that are dotted around that area. And just to remind you where they are, we've got a list there of where they're going to be. You can see there one in the Great Hall on debt advice, the one about savings in the Donald English room, Own It Now, Spend It Later in the William Sangster room, Talking Credit, Who's Borrowing and Why, that's in the Robert Parks room, and Talk Tech in the George Thomas room. Now, if you've pre-booked, there will be details on your badge. There is a very busy session, so please do stick to those. After that, of course, we'll be having lunch, and that will be back in the library and the lecture hall. And then I'll see you back here at 1:30 for this afternoon's events. Thank you.